We want to thank God this evening. We may kindly take our seats. I'm quite excited once again to be standing before you to share from the Word of God. We are picking it up from where we left yesterday, where we are looking at kingdom leadership. From what I indicated yesterday, each and every one of us, we are called upon to be leaders, not only in the house of God, but even in the world that you are living out there. So I'm going to build up my case from where we left. I would probably want to start off by sharing the fact that one thing that I believe in is that I believe in the potential that lies in the human self. To the extent that when I see someone who still has breath within, I get excited. Why? Because I'm seeing value, I'm seeing potential, and I'm also seeing a difference maker. And I believe each and every one of us, we are difference makers in our own right. And within the spaces that we find ourselves occupying, we must then make a difference in those spaces. But bringing it closer home in terms of leadership, like I indicated yesterday, at times we have some bit of a confusion in as far as leadership is concerned. Mainly because there are people who are called leaders who at times do not align with what is expected of a leader. And I think from what we looked at yesterday, I actually brought that even unto our attention. And I would also want to prove the same even tonight as I share from the Word of God. We'll go straight into the Word of the Lord from the book of Numbers. Chapter 13, Numbers chapter 13, that's where we are learning from today, and I would want to read from verse 33. Would want to read from verse 33, Numbers chapter 13, verse 33. There the Bible says, there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, are part of the Nephilim, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Right? There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, part of the Nephilim, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Now, I'm going to look at the greater part of that particular chapter, right from where it starts, even up to maybe this particular portion of scripture here. Now, this is a story where the children of Israel, as they were nearing Canaan, or when they got to the desert of Paran, the Bible says that Moses then appointed 12 leaders from each of the tribes of Israel to go out to the land of Canaan and explore the land in accordance with what the Bible or what the Lord had told Moses to do. So 12 leaders were actually sent out into the land of Canaan to then explore the land. And they were given specific instructions as to what they were supposed to do in the land of Canaan. Go and explore this land. Go up the mountains, go up the valleys. Can you determine whether the land is productive? What do you find in that particular land? And bring back the report even unto us. Tell us whether there are some mountainous areas, or if the land is productive, does it flow with milk and honey as the Lord has said to us? So go and explore this land. And the key word is that each of the individuals who were sent were leaders. They were leaders. So the Bible then says they went with that particular instruction. And when they went to the land of the south, the north. They went through the greater part of the land for 40 days. They were in the land. Now, good people, this assignment was not necessarily an easy assignment. Just like maybe some of the assignments that we give unto you. Maybe as an elder, as a deacon, there are some assignments that might appear to be so grand and so big. And this assignment was no mean assignment. So though as they got to Hebron, they realized that, wow, Hebron, they were the sons of Anak who dwelt in Hebron. These men were huge, they were big. And they saw the sons of Anak there. And it so happened that they also passed through the valley of Eshcol. When they got in the valley of Eshcol, they realized that it was very productive. And the Bible says in the valley of Eshcol, there were some grapes in there. To the extent that a bunch of grapes required 2 big men for it to be carried, just a bunch of grapes. They had to use a shaft to carry 1 bunch of grapes. It only shows how productive the valley of Eshcol was. And they took those bunches of grapes so that they'll take those home. Right? Then they saw in there, the Amalekites, they saw the Anakites, they saw the Jebusites, the different individuals of the different tribes that were in the land of Canaan. And when they did that, they are recording everything that they are seeing. Then the Bible says, after 40 days, they went back to Moses, to Aaron, and the whole Israelite community to then give a report. And when they got back, then they told them, hey, the land that we explored, it indeed flows with milk and honey. It's very productive. With the evidence of these grapes and the pomegranates and even the figs that we saw in the land, this is what we brought from the land. And they went on to say, but we saw in that land the sons of Anak. Where we read there. We saw the sons of Anak. Aiman, Sheshai, and Taumai. That's the record, the sons of Anak. They were huge, they were big. They actually say that the man Goliath originated from that particular root of the sons of Anak. They were big. So then they say, no, but in that land, even though it is productive, 10 of the people, 10 out of 12, in percentage terms, this statistician, 10 out of 12, what percentage is that? 80-something%. They came back and they said, they are the sons of Anak. We looked like grasshoppers in their sight, and even in our own sight. Can you have verse 34 there? Right? We looked like grasshoppers in their sight, and even in our own eyes. The sons of Anak. They were so big. So I don't know how they then got into the minds of these people to be able to see that they were looking like grasshoppers even their own side. But this is the record that the majority brought back to Moses and the whole congregation. Then it says that then all the congregation of Israel raised their voices and cried out. Why are they crying? Because some leaders brought back a report. So yesterday when I was talking about influence, I was saying leadership is influence. It can be influence in the negative or in the positive. And the question is, what type of leader are you? Are you the positive type of leader who influences positively, or you are the one who influences negatively? So they're saying we look like grasshoppers. And this is where I'm going to share from and pick up some leadership principles from there. To say, when they said we look like grasshoppers, what exactly were they making reference to? What is it that they meant when they said we look like grasshoppers in their eyes and even in our own eyes? But maybe before we even talk about that, there were then two of the leaders, Caleb and Joshua, who then said, let's go out and conquer, for the Lord has given us this land. Can you write this down? If the majority do something wrong, it doesn't make it right. It doesn't. So at times we have a situation where the majority of the so-called leaders in courts, at times they do things wrong, and the vote is against you. And what do you do when the vote is against you? Okay. So I'm primarily looking at what you call the grasshopper mentality leadership. The grasshopper mentality leadership. To then say, having seen that the land was flowing with milk and honey, but they then still had the audacity and the guts to say, we look like grasshoppers in our own eyes and even in their own eyes. So in other words, we are just saying, real leaders are in short supply. There could be so many people who are called leaders, but the real leaders are in short supply. That's the starting point. Being called a leader does not necessarily make you a real leader. As evidenced by the 10. They were called leaders. They were actually influencing people. But influencing people to do what? Maybe before I look specifically at the grasshopper mentality, for those who are taking or writing, you maybe write the following things down. The church or the world needs leaders who cannot be bought. What? The world or the church needs leaders who cannot be bought, whose word is their bond. Whose word is their bond. Leaders who put character above wealth. Leaders who possess a will. Leaders who are larger than their vocations. Leaders who do not lose their individuality in a crowd. Leaders who continue to serve for whether it's for minimal or for maximum gain or for no gain, they still serve. Leaders who are selfless in service. Leaders who do not settle for the ordinary. So that's what we need. This is the type of leader that we need. Someone who does not settle for the ordinary. Now, let's get back to the grasshopper mentality. When this man said we look like grasshoppers in our eyes and even their own eyes. Now, when you look at a grasshopper, a grasshopper has these big protrusions on its head, which most of us we may mistaken for eyes. Those things they do not see. Hello? The eyes of the grasshopper are somewhere down where the legs start off. But those protrusions, they are not eyes. They appear to be eyes, but they don't see. So, when they were saying, we look like grasshoppers in our own eyes and even their own eyes, what they were primarily saying is, they were saying we have eyes, but we could not see. These things that we are seeing, these ones, they have a limitation. They don't see. Leaders, they don't see using these. They see using the inner eyes. So what these men did is, they were saying, fine, we have eyes, but we don't see. There was a certain lady by the name Helen Keller. Helen Keller was visually impaired. She was blind. But she said, the most pathetic person in the world is someone who has eyes but lacking vision. That's the most pathetic person in the world. Having eyes but lacking vision. And these guys, when they said, we look like grasshoppers, all they were saying is, we had eyes. There are some things that we saw, but we could not see beyond what we were seeing. What are we saying? A true leader is someone who sees beyond what they are seeing. You know, at times we judge people by what they are and whom they are presently. But there is more to this person than what you are presently seeing. You know, when Joseph was in prison, he was not just seeing himself as a prisoner. He was seeing himself in the eyes of what he had seen in the vision or in the dream. So do not be limited by the prison walls. If you are a worker today, it doesn't mean that you remain a worker all your life. Hello? So do not be limited by the prison walls of your salary. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18. What does it say? Where there's no vision, right? My people perish for lack of vision. Right? We are saying, as a leader that you must be able to see. You know, I'm one person, I always say that I can speak on vision for the next 8 hours. Why? Because vision is so powerful. It is. Remember yesterday I was talking about Joseph, where he had a vision, he saw beyond his present time. And this man who had the grasshopper mentality, they could not see beyond their present circumstances. All that affected them was what they were seeing in the present. But there is a greater reality that lies out there beyond what these eyes can see. And those 10 leaders out of 12, they were only seeing their reality in the context of what they've seen with these physical eyes. True leaders see beyond their physical eyes. You know the book of Genesis, chapter 13, verse 10 and 11, there's a record of Lot. Lot was given the opportunity to choose first. And what does the Bible say? The Lot looked at the greenery of the land that was down there. And he was impressed by what he was seeing. His vision was inspired by what he was seeing in the immediate. But that from that very same land, he ran out of it. When Sodom, with everything that he had was destroyed in there. And he only came out himself and his 2 children. And he had probably a few clothes. Why? Because he had a grasshopper mentality. A grasshopper mentality is only worried about the immediate or only sees the immediate. But great leaders, real leaders indeed, they see beyond the present. They cast their sight deep into the future. I always make reference to a certain gentleman by the name Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a German Jew during Hitler's time. And he was sent to the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Now, when he was there in the concentration camp, so many Jews were dying in their large numbers. But this guy, he was busy writing some notes and preparing some presentations, which, according to him, he was going to make to some Americans later on one day when he would walk out of the concentration camp. And after 1945, he saw himself addressing large masses of Americans in America about how life in the concentration camp was like. And when he was asked, but it appears as if you have made this presentation so many times before. Then he said, yes, indeed. But where? When I was still in the concentration camp in Germany, I saw you. Hello? He was seeing them way ahead of. Oh, let's come closer home. Nelson Mandela, when he was confined to Robben Islands, he wrote a very profound statement. Right? He is a man who is supposed to die in prison, right? Sentenced to life imprisonment. But he's busy writing, one day I will live and walk in a free and democratic South Africa. And he walked out of that place to walk in these streets that we're walking in. Hello? The power of vision. Real leaders, they live beyond the grasshopper mentality. They have a vision that goes beyond their immediate confines. You know, Esau, he limited his vision to a plate of soup. What is this birthright to me? That was his statement. Give me soup. And he saw this birthright. He could not see beyond what was before him. What are you seeing? I wish you could tell your neighbor that, look at me closely, because what you are seeing is not the real me. Have you told them? What you are seeing is not the real them. In other words, we are saying, even a leader must also be able to see others in the rightful perspective. You see, when Jesus saw Peter in the Sea of Galilee fishing, Jesus did not just see this guy who was just fishing. Come, follow me, I'll make you a fisher of men. When he saw the tax collector Matthew, he did not just see a tax collector. Are you still here? In other words, we are saying we must transition ourselves from the grasshopper mentality of only seeing the immediate and be able to cast our sight deep into the future. In other words, we are saying real leaders, they see deep into posterity. That's what they do. You know, when Jesus came aboard, one of the things that he did, what I call the Jesus developmental strategy. Right? One thing that he did, he started discovering potential, right? Right from the onset. Within the first few months in ministry, he was then saying, hey, which potential should I bring closer? He discovered potential. What does he do next? He developed that potential. He started training them. What does he do next? He deployed that potential. You go 2 by 2. What does he do next? He departed from the scene because his job was done. And we're saying every leader who is a visionary, who does not have a grasshopper mentality, is going to discover, develop, deploy, and obviously depart from the scene. And when they depart from the scene, the system is running. Now, when they said we look like grasshoppers in our own eyes and in their own eyes, they were primarily saying we are cowards. Cowards in the sense that if there are some grasshoppers here and you produce some sound of some sort, all the grasshoppers, they flee away. Sound is something that will just scare the grasshoppers. That's a spirit of cowardice. Where at times we are saying we have leaders who have titles, but they are cowards in their own right. The way they conduct themselves they lack courage in the manner in which they do things. So in other words, these guys were intimidated. You know, the emphasis that they gave to this about the sons of Anak, it only shows that they were so much intimidated by these guys. So in other words, they were so fearful in a way. But we are saying that there is always need that we transition and move away from fear. The land that they were exploring, it was already there. They were already given that land. Right? The promise was saying, I'm taking you to a land that flows with milk and honey. So they were just meant to just go there and cement what they were already promised. But they failed to do that. Why? Because they entertained cowardice, which at times we see in the church. When, at times we are working towards a particular project, you would have 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 elders or leaders who then say, this one I think is a bit too big. This one is impossible. I don't know whether it happens here, but where I come from, at times it does. Where some leaders, they then instill fear in others. Because in their minds, they are like grasshoppers. They are intimidated by what they are seeing. They are intimidated by what they are hearing. They are intimidated by the state of issues out there. They are intimidated by what they hear maybe on television, on social media. But we are saying a true leader, a real leader, is someone who must then be able to transition from what we call cowardice to courage. Caleb and Joshua, they said, let's go ye forth and conquer, for the Lord has given us this land. That's being courageous. And the same Joshua, when he was then getting into Canaan after the departure of Moses, he is being told repeatedly, be strong and courageous. In the book of Joshua, the first chapter, I think it's repeated about 5, if not 6 times. That statement, be strong and be courageous. We are saying there is need for you to be strong and courageous. And like I said yesterday, what I'm talking about here, it should also apply even in the world of work. It should also apply out there, because as a person, part of you is spiritual, but part of you is non-spiritual. And when you're out there, you must also prove that I'm a leader through displaying high levels of courage. So in other words, we are saying, let not your background intimidate you. At times, the cowardice comes from our background. We are busy thinking, but I'm the only one in my family who is trying to do this. Is it ever going to work out? Or at times, look at your age and say, no, I'm too young. Or someone say, now I'm too old. Hello? Or someone is intimidated by their skin color. What color is this? This is not black. This is dark chocolate. But at times you want to believe what they tell you. Would you call yourself black? Dark chocolate. Chocolate. But at times we get intimidated by maybe our skin color. And you fail then to exercise your leadership. Think of David. He got into the valley of Elah to hear the booming voice of Goliath. Is there a man amongst you? Then he goes around and says, what shall be given to the man who kills this thing? Courage. In other words, here is a person who has jumped out of the grasshopper mentality. I might be young, but I have what I takes. Why? Because I serve the living God. It's just that. What shall be given to the man who kills this thing? There are so many Goliaths that must be killed here. But somehow we are entertaining the grasshopper man of fear. Because it appears these sons of Anak, they are so big. And we entertain cowardice. In other words, we are saying, courageous leaders, they defy the vote and they march on. This is what Caleb and Joshua, they defy the vote. Let's go forth and conquer, for the Lord has indeed given us this land. So whilst others are busy pulling, the rest down, they are influencing the negative. Stand your ground. Do what you must do. We look like grasshoppers in our own eyes and even their own. What is it that they meant? If grasshoppers get into a field of ripe grapes, under normal circumstances, grasshoppers can actually eat grapes. But when they get in the field of ripe grapes, grasshoppers, they don't go and attack the ripe grape. They will rather suck the sap that is dripping down the back of the grape plant. Why? Because they feel inferior. To say, we are not, the rightful candidate to go and attack the ripe grape. So rather benefit from what is dripping off the plant. We call that inferiority complex. There are so many leaders who are so filled with inferiority complex to the extent that they don't even do much. Here being asked, can you get this mic? Can you lead us through the prayer? No, I can't. Why don't you give it to someone else? Can you do this for us? No, not me. I'm still very new in eldership. I'm still a new elder. Can you do this? No, but I was just, I'm just a new deacon, just my first year being a deacon. Inferiority complex. But to us, we are saying there is a leader. When these guys were sent forth, they were actually identified as the leaders of Israel. But they were so filled with inferiority, probably because of what they saw. The Canaanites and the Jebusites and the Anakites. So when they said, we look like grasshoppers in our own eyes and in our own eyes, they were saying, inferiority just filled us, guys. Someone is going to an interview, right? And the moment they look at other candidates who have also been invited like them, they are so filled with inferiority complex to the extent that they are defeated before they even get in. They've already lost the job. In other words, they are so filled with ignorance to a point where they don't see the value that they have or that they possess. These leaders, right, the 10, they didn't realize that they had a big God who was before them. They had forgotten that the very big God had allowed them to pass through the Red Sea. They had forgotten that Pharaoh had sunk in the sea. But they were so filled with inferiority. How many miracles have you encountered and seen in your own life? How many miracles have you seen in this church? Great things have happened. But at times, when something is presented before us, they say, it can't, it won't. How many prophecies have you received? A leader for that matter. But when an assignment presents itself, then you say to yourself, but I really feel, maybe it's not the rightful time. You give so many excuses. I always tell people that an excuse is not a result. It's not. An explanation is not a result. But many a time, what do? We are always giving excuses. We think the excuse is the one that is going to solve the problem. As long as there's a problem, you must solve the problem. But at times, we are filled with so much inferiority. Someone said, if you see a snake in the house, don't run about trying to look for the owner of the snake. Or don't try to determine the characteristics of the snake or how it behaves. Or to form a committee on snake affairs. the snake, then look for the owner afterwards. We are talking of leadership here. We look like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and even in their own eyes. Now, grasshoppers, they move in large numbers. Huh? And when they move in those large numbers, if they get into a field, huh, they raise it to the ground. They leave nothing. That's grasshoppers for you. Remember what I said? The majority is often wrong. It's often wrong. We are saying, as a leader that you are, at times you want to check on the company that you are keeping. Are you going for the crowd? Are you going for the masses? Or you are going for the select few? Who is within your circle of influence? I always tell people that egos, they fly with other egos. You won't find 20 egos in the sky. Maybe the maximum that you can get is 5. Huh? But, you know, the ravens, they can go in large numbers. Egos are produced one at a time. So are leaders. You don't produce 1,000 egos, but you can produce 20,000 broilers. And that's why that explains why broilers never fly. They are mass produced. But we are saying at times we have a broiler type of leader. They just want to be spoon-fed. They are moving large numbers in a crowd. But we want leaders indeed. The Caleb and Joshua type leader. Who choose to defy what the majority says. What company are you keeping? Are you still here? We're talking leadership here. Elijah on top of Mount Carmel, he challenged all those prophets of Baal. One out. Hello? Can you stand your ground to challenge what is bad? When everyone else is saying, no, let's just go by this. But you know very well that this is not the rightful thing. Can you then stand alone on your own? Remember the last lap of Elijah before he was taken up? The Bible says Elijah was moving alongside Elisha, his mentee. And there were 50 of the sons of the prophets at Gilgal. And what did they say? The good people, these people were leaders. 50 sons of the prophets. They were elders. Hello? Then they are saying, hey, please don't go. This man is going to be taken away from you today. And what does Elijah say? Because he was not of the grasshopper mentality. As long as my servant Elijah lives, and as long as the Lord lives, I will not remain here. He proceeded. He was not discouraged by the majority. Remember, the majority is often wrong. If you have to make a difference in this world, there are moments when you have to move away from the majority. The reason why there's that record of Elisha and Elisha is because Elisha chose to be different from the 50. Then they proceeded to Bethel. When they go to Bethel, there was another company of the sons of the prophets, 50 of them. Then they said, hey, this man is going to be taken away from you. Huh? And he would not listen to that. And the only reason why he received a double portion is because he was of a different caliber altogether. He was a real leader. If you know what God has called you unto, at times you don't have to listen to what fake leaders would say. Are we still here? Grasshopper mentality. Now, you realize that the majority always want you to look like them. They want you to fit in. I want you to go to the mirror and look at the mirror, when you leave this place. There is only one of your kind. 7 billion people in the world. One out! So why do you want to be like them? When you came here to this church, you came alone. When you came here, maybe to South Africa, you came alone. But how come you want to be like them? The majority, they want you to be like them. So the grasshopper mentality, all they're saying, we look like grasshoppers. All they were saying is, you know what? We are driven by the majority. We are driven by the wind. So the other thing is that the grasshoppers, they go where the wind is going. If the wind is blowing in this direction, they tend to go in that direction. Grasshoppers, they don't go against the flow of the wind. So in other words, they don't go against the current. You always say that live fish does not swim downstream. Live fish always swims against the current. That is the sign that it is live. And you are saying a live leader is someone who is prepared to go against the current. But a grasshopper mindset is saying, no, I'll just go where the wind is going. In other words, a grasshopper-minded person is convenience-oriented. They want it easy. Haven't you met people? They just want it, so easy. When it gets a bit tough, a bit difficult, then you won't see them. When you talk of prayer convention, you won't see them. When you talk of, some fellowship, some braai, then they appear in numbers. So in other words, they're saying, stand your ground, have a sense of direction. Let those who are around you know pretty well, but this one is heading this direction. The other thing, besides even, going by the wind and having sense of the grasshoppers, even though they have wings, but at times they don't even use the wings. They hop from grass to grass. That's why they're called grasshoppers. So much capacity, highly talented, but only achieve this little. And at times we know this one has great potential, but that potential is never realized. Grasshopper mentality. Some of you, you will be shocked one of these days when you get to heaven to be asked, what were you doing on earth? And you are so excited that I was the position that we have now. I was a manager in this other company. Then you are being now shown a picture of what you were supposed to have owned. And they are being told, okay, the size of company that you were so happy to be a manager in is the size of company that you're supposed to own. How do you feel? I'm still very much convinced that wherever you are, whatever position you have right now is too small given what God has intended you to become. Very small indeed. But at times you are busy comparing yourself with your sisters and your brothers and your these other people within your locality. So in other words, we're saying, have a clear-cut goal. Have a clear-cut plan for yourself. Have a sense of direction. In other words, have a destination that you're heading to. Yeah? When the destination is set, it means the direction is given. You then don't change direction because it's getting difficult. Because the destination is this side and I go this side. If we then agree, but this is what we are going to do as a leadership in this particular place, we then go for it. Why? Because this is what we agreed on. Not to start to change the goalposts because it's appearing to be difficult or the current is then changed to another direction. Let's still do it nonetheless. So in other words, we are saying a leader is a man or a woman who is decisive. And when you've made a decision, you stick by it. But grasshopper-minded individuals, what do? They are influenced by the weather. What do you call the weather type Christians? When it's too cold, you don't see them. When it's too hot, you don't see them. Huh? So the same grasshopper, when it's too cold, when it's so cold, you can easily get to it and grab it. It's influenced by the weather. So it then waits until maybe it's 10 or 11 a.m. when now it's sunny, then it starts to hope about. But otherwise, early in the morning, you can go and harvest them. And we have leaders like that. Like these ones that were sent to explore the land. Grasshopper type. They cannot influence their spaces. In other words, they are thermometers and not thermostats. A thermometer, if you throw it into a cup where there's ice, why it drops off 0 degrees. You take it, you throw it into boiling water, why it shoots up 100 degrees. Thermometer type leader. But we're saying we require thermostat type leaders who are able to influence their space and their environment. When you arrive, things start to change. Why? Because you're a thermostat. So in other words, we're saying leadership is not for the faint-hearted. It's for those men and women who are made of steel and velvet, who can stand their ground. In other words, we're saying true leaders, real leaders, they make a difference. Through their actions, through their decisions, through their choices. Are you still here? I always ask this question, right? Because I've realized that at times people then leave and go elsewhere by other means and not their bodies. So if I asked whether they're still here, that's the one who was about to leave will quickly come back, or the one who had left will quickly come back. Grasshoppers have a very high appetite. At times they consume more than their own body weight in matter daily. In other words, they have no control over their appetite. Real leaders, they have a control over their appetite. They are disciplined. So in other words, when I say look like grasshoppers, they're saying we are so indisciplined in our manner of doing things. Like I was saying, grasshoppers, they can totally destroy vegetation because of their appetite. If you cannot manage your appetite, it means you can easily self-destruct. Either through too much eating and you not be able to manage your body. Huh? Or at times you eat what you're not supposed to eat. Or you at times end up making decisions that are because of your appetite, which is too high. Grasshopper type leaders. You must be able to manage your appetite. Be disciplined. You know, this generation is so much affected by so many distractions, notably the screen. The moment, a message pops in, you want to check who is that? Okay. In other words, we are saying, manage your appetite to the point where you check on what you are eating. What you allow into your system determines your destiny. What you watch, what you read. What are you reading? Now, it's very difficult even to talk about reading, especially to the people who are here. Yeah? We don't read. But do you know that a leader is a reader? I was laughing with the overseer last week when he was telling me about, I think some place, I don't know whether it's here, when he was transferred. When he was transferred at one time, the pastor who was there, who was leaving, and him when he was coming, and he told me that the other pastor had a box of books. Right? But then when your overseer was then coming in, the largest cargo that he had was the books. For information, take advantage of that man who is still here. He's loaded. And why is he loaded? Because of the type of material that he reads. He reads massively and doesn't hesitate to invest in books. Oh yeah? What are you reading? I was telling people to say, if I see some of the people here reading, seriously, it's because they have an exam next week but one. Otherwise, you don't read. And at times you can easily tell when you give one of these leaders an opportunity to say something up front, then you can say, okay, very blank. Nothing upstairs. From the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. You only produce what you have. So what are you reading? What are you allowing into your system? The grasshoppers, they are consuming. But what is it that they are consuming? The grasshopper mentality. So in other words, you're saying, you must always consider the consequences of what you are feeding on. What you are feeding on ultimately determines how far you go. Whether you go upwards or you go downwards. What you are feeding on. What you are watching. It determines where you end up. Especially as a leader. It also determines, like I said, what comes out of your tongue. Is your tongue creative? Or does it create positive things? Yeah, every tongue is creative, but it then depends on what it creates. These men, when they said you look like grasshoppers, they were creating something, which then explains why on the last verse they then talks about how the whole Israelite community was then grumbling and complaining. He said, let's go back to Egypt. They'd easily forgotten what was happening in Egypt. They were then thinking of going back. because of what they were eating. Do you know, for some of us who have who are SRBs, do you know an SRB? You know? Strong raw background. That's me. Mine is a V at the beginning, very strong raw background. You know, at times you get hold of a grasshopper. Right? When you get over a grasshopper, within a few minutes or seconds, it had removed its back legs. It removes its back legs. In other words, it gets so angry to the extent where it removes its back leg. But do you know that the back legs of the grasshopper are the ones that propel it to fly? So when they are removed, it means it's now incapacitated. Do you know that we have leaders like that? Who, when you subject to some bit of pressure, I no longer want the position. Take your position. That they cannot control their emotions. They throw words anyhow. You actually wonder, is this a leader? How do they end up being an elder or being a deacon? Grasshopper mentality. They are so emotionally charged. Why am I taking time to talk so much about the negative? Because, there are so many people who are there that we need to take away from there to being, champions within your spaces. What do you do when you're frustrated? What do you do when you hear that someone, a fellow leader or a fellow elder or even a pastor was saying something about you? Are you going to remove your back legs? In other words, we're saying you must be able to stand to stand on your ground, be firm. You must be able to manage your anger. In other words, you're saying don't remove your line of defense. The back legs also constitute the line of defense. But when they are gone, it means the line of defense is also gone. Manage your emotions. Know what to say and what not to say. For information, it's not everything that you know that you must say. It's part of managing, what is, your space. Not everything that passes through or maybe through your mind or through your hands should be passed on to the next, even if it's true. Are we there? Okay, let me share with you a story. In Russia, during the reign of Tsar Nicholas, there was a law that political prisoners would then be sentenced to death through the hangman's noose. So it so happened that there was a certain gentleman who was then sentenced to death to the hangman's noose. But the law would then say, in the event that thing, the noose thing, will slip off when someone is being put there, then it means this person has been saved by the gods. They are now a free man. Right? So this gentleman is sent to the hangman's noose just to die there. And wow, when they switched that thing on, it didn't. It slipped off. Then he fell to the ground. The man is still alive. So they had to go to Tsar Nicholas with the record to say that, can you then sign that this man is now a free man? Because, the thing or the noose could not kill him. But this guy, so the Tsar Nicholas, when he was about to sign, he then said, but before I sign, did he say anything? Did he pray to the gods? What did he do? Then they said, he said a country as big as Russia could not even do anything correctly to the extent that even the hangman's noose cannot kill a person. Then Tsar said, okay, let me not sign. Can you go back and prove to him that we can do something right? Then he was sent back and he died. Know what to say and what not to. Are we still here? We are talking leadership here. Like I said, leaders, they don't just live for themselves. They also think about the future. After the male grasshopper is mated with the female grasshopper, that's the end. You won't hear about the male grasshopper again. After the female grasshopper has also laid the eggs, you won't hear about the female grasshopper again. Whatever happens to the eggs, well, it's up to them. They'll find their way. Hello? That's being irresponsible. So when they said we look like grasshoppers, all they were saying is we are very irresponsible in our own manner of doing things. How responsible are you as a leader? Are you concerned about those who are coming after you? Are you concerned about the future? What are you doing to develop others? I've always said at every level that you are, at whatever age you are, there must always be someone who must be looking up unto you. You must be mentoring someone. You must be developing someone. But you know what happens at times? When a youngster comes and doing almost the same thing that you're doing, they naturally feel threatened. You think they want to take our jobs. Hello? But true leaders, they have the capacity of developing others. In other words, we are saying a leader or a successful leader without a successor is a total failure. Always develop others. Who are you developing? In your particular area of operation, are you developing anyone? Are they learning something from you? And are they learning something positive? So, develop potential. So, in other words, we are saying there is a certain mindset which is the opposite of the grasshopper mindset that each and every one of us should have, which you call the champion mindset. The champion mindset that Caleb and Joshua had, where they were of a different caliber altogether in terms of their thinking, in terms of their execution of duty. Let's go forth and conquer. Why? Because the Lord has given us this land. It's a mindset of positive attitude. Attitude has a power to propel you to the highest altitude altogether. A positive attitude can take you to the highest. And you see, these two men, because the whole Israelite community then grumbled, then the Lord said, none of these people is going to enter except Caleb and Joshua. Why? Because they had the rightful attitude. Why? Because they were real leaders indeed. And like I've said, it's not everyone who has a title leader who is a real leader. Mainly dependent on the influence that you are making on those who are following. The 10 of the leaders, they influence the whole community wrongly. And they destroyed the whole generation because of their influence. 2 of the leaders, fine, they remained to then influence the younger generation that then managed to cross over. Are you the type who then enable people to cross over? To transition from being ordinary to extraordinary? To transition from being lowly to being at the higher echelons? Are you the type of leader who is then going to say, it did not be because of the contribution that I made, probably these people would not be where they are? What decisions are you making? And what actions are you making? In other words, we are saying a real leader is someone who is so action-oriented to the extent that
We always say that leadership is a movement and not a monument. Leadership is not static. It is transitory. And this is the type of mindset that all of us, we ought to harness. So we are saying, leadership is a movement. And that's what Caleb and Joshua then displayed. The movement. Right? I'll come back and talk about the movement.